My sister said I forged everything. In front of strangers, cameras, and the house where we once shared birthday cake and scraped knees. One finger pointed, one lie told. And just like that, my sister rewrote my story. But what she didn't know was that while she was busy faking tears and cashing trust funds, I was remembering every name, every past, every truth she thought she'd buried. So if you think this is a story about betrayal, you're only half right. It's also about what happens when the wrong person is underestimated, and the right lie cracks open the past like a fault line. My sister had me arrested, in handcuffs, right in front of the house where we used to play hopscotch on the driveway and argue over who got the bigger scoop of ice cream. That house had our laughter soaked into the walls, our secrets under its floorboards. And still, she stood beside a detective I'd never seen before, pointed at me with trembling fingers, and said the words that shattered everything. That's her. She forged it all. In court, she cried like she meant it. Not the ugly cry of someone broken by grief, but the carefully measured sobs of a woman who'd rehearsed her performance. She told them I'd siphoned off money from our aunt's estate, laundered it through a fake company, signed my name where hers should have been. The documents, the account trails, all looked legitimate, flawless even. I sat there with a dry throat and trembling hands while her lawyer called me calculated, manipulative, dangerous. No one objected. Not even me. I wanted to stand, to scream, to point at her and yell, "She's lying!" But I didn't, because I knew something she didn't know I remembered. See, she didn't just frame me. She handed me the shovel and smiled while I dug my own grave, watching me crumble while she played the good sister, the grieving niece, the one deserving of everything. And while the media snapped her photo and called her a victim of betrayal, she sipped from a champagne glass and laughed behind closed doors. But what she didn't realize was that the silence she mistook for defeat was actually strategy. That behind my blank stare and handcuffed wrists, there was still someone watching, someone remembering, someone who knew exactly who she used to be, before she changed her name, before she buried her past under a new haircut and a carefully curated resume. So while she strutted in her heels and declared herself the rightful heir, I stayed quiet. I let her win the first round. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. I know what you're thinking. It can't get worse than being handcuffed by your own sister. But trust me, this is where the silence gets loudest. If you've ever been abandoned when you needed someone most, you'll want to hear what came next. They kept me in holding for 2 nights. The kind of cold, humming room where the fluorescent lights buzz louder than your thoughts, where time doesn't pass so much as it presses down on your chest until you forget what air is supposed to feel like. I tried calling, twice the first night, once the second. But no one picked up. Not my lawyer, not my so-called friends, certainly not her. The woman who shared my blood, who shared my childhood, who shared birthday cakes and bunk beds, and now shared my betrayal. The next morning, a correctional officer slid a tray toward me without eye contact. Oatmeal, 2 crackers, and a cup of something that might have been coffee if you squinted hard enough. I stared at the plastic fork for 10 minutes before I touched it. That was the moment it sank in. I wasn't just being punished, I was being erased. By the time I was released, pending investigation, my name had already made the rounds on every local news station. Fraud suspect Rachel Moore allegedly manipulates estate documents to secure inheritance. I didn't even know that they'd taken my mugshot until I saw it on the news loop in the convenience store window as I walked past in borrowed clothes. My job sent me a cold, formal email. Administrative leave pending review. My bank account? Frozen, flagged for suspicious activity. The barista I used to chat with every Thursday morning pretended not to see me when I passed. And the friends I thought would ask questions, even hard ones, didn't ask anything at all. They just disappeared. Silence became its own kind of verdict. People don't wait for court decisions when gossip arrives faster. Meanwhile, she was drinking Merlot on Aunt Marjorie's veranda, flashing a sympathetic smile to the estate lawyer, and referring to herself, audibly, as the last responsible Moore left. They paused the will's execution, pending legal clarity. I watched a lifetime of my aunt's trust and love get boxed and appraised like furniture at an estate sale. She got the wine glass, I got the cuffs. She got the room with a view. I got the waiting room at county jail. They said I was unstable, unreliable, greedy. But what they really meant was I was inconvenient, a problem, an obstacle between a liar and what she wanted. And in their world, people like me don't get justice. We get edited out. But what they didn't know was that even at rock bottom, I was still watching. And I never forgot a single lie she told. At this point, many would have given up. But here's the thing. When someone digs a grave for you, sometimes they leave behind a footprint. Are you paying close attention? Because this next part changes everything. It happened during a hearing. Just a passing comment, a smug little aside meant to discredit me further. But it cracked everything open. My sister, with her perfect poise and polished voice, made a joke, one that was buried so deep in our family, it should have stayed there. It was a line Aunt Marjorie used to whisper only to me, years ago, when we snuck pastries before dinner and swore never to tell. No one else knew it, no one but me. And the real person I used to share a room with. My gut twisted, because that joke didn't just come from nowhere. It came from another life. One where my sister didn't go by Sophie Martin. One where she had a different face, a different past, and a very different name. When I got home, I opened the old cedar box where I kept what was left of our childhood. Letters, cards, clippings. And there it was. A note from a caseworker buried under yellowed photos, referencing a foster placement connected to a girl named Elena. It didn't hit me all at once. It came in fragments. Moments I'd dismissed, tiny red flags I'd brushed off as quirks. Her fear of background checks. The way she panicked when her passport expired. The way she always slipped out of family reunions early, like she was allergic to too many relatives in one room. Like being seen too long might get her noticed. I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, a friend from my old podcast days. She used to help me research family histories, but these days, she had a private investigator's license and a talent for making ghosts resurface. I gave her everything I had. 3 days later, she called me back. Her voice was quiet, measured, but I could hear it shaking. "Rachel," she said, "your sister isn't Sophie Martin. She's Elena Caro. She's been wanted in Nevada for over 10 years on felony fraud and financial conspiracy." I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I just stood there, holding the phone like it weighed more than my body could carry. The world didn't tilt. It narrowed, like a camera lens focusing in on a single, searing truth. She hadn't just stolen money. She'd stolen her identity, her whole life. And now she was trying to bury me to keep her new one safe. I wasn't confused. I wasn't delusional. And I damn sure wasn't dead. I had the truth. And the truth? It cuts deeper than any lie ever could. Have you ever caught someone in a lie so big it cracked their entire world? That's where we are now. If you thought my silence meant surrender, what I did next will prove otherwise. And I need you right here for it. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream or slam my fists on tables or demand anyone believe me. I'd learned the hard way that loud doesn't equal heard. Not when you're the one in the orange jumpsuit. Not when your name's already been smeared across every headline in town. So instead, I went quiet, surgical. I gathered the documents, the fingerprint record from her old juvenile file, the school transcript under the name Elena Caro, the digital traces of her sealed charges in Nevada, and I filed a fraud report directly to the estate executor. No fanfare, just precision. The same night, I opened an encrypted email account, attached every piece of that dossier, and sent it to an investigative reporter known for peeling the shine off high society scandals. The subject line? Local heiress or wanted felon. Meanwhile, my lawyer, the only person who hadn't flinched when I first told her something wasn't right, submitted a new affidavit to the court. She didn't argue emotion. She presented data, patterns, discrepancies in Sophie's timeline, sealed records, a credible link between the witness standing against me and a decade-old fraud case that had never been resolved. Within 48 hours, the judge issued a stay on proceedings and ordered a full background check of the key witness. The courtroom went from smug confidence to cold silence in seconds. I wasn't there when Sophie got the news, but I heard about it. How her hands trembled, how her carefully painted smile cracked around the edges, how she stepped into the hallway to call someone, anyone, and came back visibly shaken. They said she looked like someone had walked over her grave. First time in 10 years, she actually turned around. Not because I shouted, but because I whispered. To the right people. And when my lawyer asked if I wanted to start with a simple claim of character defamation, I told her, no, I want to go biblical. You've waited for justice. Now you'll see what it looks like when truth walks into a courtroom in handcuffs. Ready to watch the moment she finally loses control? Stay with me. You won't want to miss what happens next. That morning, everything looked pristine. The sky was a polite shade of blue, the courthouse steps freshly swept, and my sister, no, Elena, stood at the top of them like she owned the world. She wore white. Of course she did. White jacket, white pants, a pearl necklace that glinted under the sun like it belonged to royalty. Her hair was perfect, her lips painted in just the right shade of camera-friendly rose. And she was mid-sentence, flashing her best practice smile at a local news anchor when the cruisers pulled up. No sirens, just the quiet crunch of tires on pavement and the unmistakable clink of handcuffs being readied. She turned her head, maybe expecting more cameras, more praise. Instead, she locked eyes with two officers walking straight toward her. At first, she didn't flinch, just blinked, confused, as if they were interrupting her scene. Then they said her name, her real name. Elena Caro, you are under arrest. Her mouth fell open, but no sound came out. The reporters, sensing blood in the water, started filming without blinking. One officer took her wrist. The other read the charges. Her mascara had barely dried when it began to smear. No, I'm Sophie Martin, she screamed, her voice shrill and cracking, dragging attention from everyone on the steps. I am Sophie Martin! But it didn't matter. Not when every major station had already received the press release. Not when the police already had the fingerprint match. Not when the digital archives confirmed the sealed warrant. Within the hour, the headline had gone live. Heiress exposed as decade-long fugitive, Elena Caro arrested outside courthouse. Her face was everywhere, but not the curated, composed version she worked so hard to maintain. No filters, no control, just raw panic frozen in time. The moment her empire of lies collapsed in full view of the world. And for the first time in her life, she said nothing. No quick rebuttal, no sharp retort, no snide little jab to shift the blame. Just silence. Because the truth doesn't need a microphone to echo. It just needs to land, once, in the right place. She thought it was over. She thought getting arrested was the end of the story. But sometimes, the most cutting blow isn't loud. It's quiet, public, and unforgettable. You'll see exactly what I mean, right now. That night, while headlines swirled and reporters scrambled for the next explosive detail, I didn't hold a press conference. I didn't call in favors or pose for cameras. I just posted one thing, a photo of a necklace, simple, delicate, with a locket shaped like a teardrop. Inside was a tiny engraving, to E from M. No explanation, no hashtags, just a quiet caption that cut deeper than any courtroom testimony ever could. She wore it like it was hers, forgot it used to belong to the girl she pretended never existed. By morning, the internet had done what it always does best. Strangers became detectives. Threads exploded. Comments flooded in. People remembered photos, found archived mentions of a foster placement, uncovered a yearbook listing under a different name. The pieces clicked into place, one by one, until the carefully constructed identity she'd hidden behind for over a decade shattered in plain sight. Not with a bang, but with whispers sharp enough to slice reputation like glass. And while she scrambled to explain, to downplay, to rewrite the story again, I did something far more permanent. I donated part of my inheritance, the money she tried to destroy me for, to a nonprofit that helps wrongfully accused women reclaim their names after wrongful arrests. I called it the Marjorie Fund in honor of the aunt who always saw through the polish, who believed in dignity over spectacle, and who wore honesty like armor. When a journalist later asked me why, I didn't give them a dramatic quote. I gave them the truth. Because lies, no matter how pretty, always crack under pressure. Like porcelain, like she did. It wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, but it was unforgettable. And every time someone sees that locket photo, every time that fund helps another woman rebuild what was stolen from her, I know she feels it. Not as a blow, but as a legacy she'll never be part of. You've seen the fall. Now let me show you the rise. Because healing after betrayal isn't just possible, it's powerful. And the life I built from those ashes, you'll want to see it for yourself. The house smelled like rosemary and old wood polish when I first moved back in. Aunt Marjorie's cottage had been empty for years, left in limbo during the legal chaos, but somehow it still felt like home the moment I stepped onto the porch. I painted the railings seafoam green, the way she always wanted. Every morning, I'd tie my hair up, slip on a pair of gardening gloves, and press my fingers into the soil she used to swear had character. I lined the fence with fresh rosemary, just like she had. It grew quickly, wildly, almost as if it remembered her too. Some days, I'd catch myself humming her favorite hymn while pruning back the lavender. Some days, I'd cry, but they were different tears. Not the frantic, angry ones I used to swallow in courtrooms and police stations, but soft, grateful ones. Ones that came when I woke up and didn't feel dread in my chest. When I brewed tea and didn't flinch at the sound of my phone. When I walked down the street and someone smiled without that half-second of hesitation, without the unspoken, "Wasn't she the one?" My name had been cleared, not just legally, but publicly. The court issued a formal apology. A gesture some might call symbolic, but to me, it meant everything. It was printed in this paper, broadcast on the news, and pinned on the bulletin board of the local library, right next to a photo of Aunt Marjorie planting sunflowers in 2002. That was the first day I let myself believe it was over, that I had really survived it. One morning, while sipping tea on the porch, I opened a letter with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in careful script. It was from a young woman in Oregon. She said she'd followed the story online, how her own sister had done something similar to her years ago. She'd spent a long time in silence, thinking no one would believe her. But after reading what had happened to me, she finally filed her own case. She ended the letter with just one line. "You gave me permission to stop apologizing for being right." I didn't realize I was crying until the steam from my teacup blurred the ink. Sometimes I still find myself explaining things to no one. An old habit from the days when I felt like I had to justify my existence to every stranger in a room. But more often now, I just breathe. I sit in the sun. I pull weeds. I bake. I wave to my neighbors. I talk to the lawyer who never stopped believing in me. She visits now and then, brings me books, sometimes her son. And I've started reconnecting with people I thought I'd lost forever. My niece sends me postcards from college. We joke about starting a herb garden together someday. The silence I live in now isn't lonely. It's sacred. It's the silence of not having to explain, not having to prove, just being. At night, I light a candle in the kitchen, not for anyone in particular, just for peace. I don't need the world to remember my name. I just want to remember how it feels to speak it without shame, to wear it without weight. And every time the wind catches the scent of rosemary and carries it through the open window, I smile, because I know she'd be proud. Not just that I got the truth out, but that I lived through it and built something gentle in its place. And while I found peace, She found silence. But not the kind that soothes, the kind that stings. Don't go anywhere, because watching someone lose everything they faked, it's haunting, and it's justice. Elena Caro, the name she tried to bury for over a decade, is now etched into every record that matters. It appears in court documents, arrest logs, and a mugshot that no amount of makeup or public relations could ever soften. She stood in front of the judge and asked for bail, but the answer was swift and final. Denied. The risk of flight was too great, the deception too deep. Just like that, the woman who had once presented herself as the poised, articulate Sophie Martin, philanthropist, businesswoman, social darling, became inmate number 38462. Her perfectly curated digital footprint began vanishing piece by piece. Influencer pages that had once adored her stopped tagging her. Podcasts that once hosted her for sound bites on redefining resilience quietly deleted her episodes. Sponsorships pulled out. The inboxes she once boasted about managing with a team of assistants went silent. Her fiancé, the one who'd gushed in interviews about how she radiated integrity, ended the engagement by email. No visit, no confrontation, just a legal notice to sever shared assets and remove his name from anything remotely connected to her. Her LinkedIn profile, once full of endorsements and glowing testimonials, became a museum of lies. Employers were subpoenaed, credentials questioned. Every achievement began to unravel under scrutiny. And then came the silence. Not the loud, scandalous silence of headlines, but the slow, private kind that gnaws at a person when no one answers their calls. When old friends ghost you. When no one returns a message. When you're left with only yourself and the echo of your own choices. Inside the cell, there are no pearl earrings, no white tailored dresses, no handlers to filter her words. Just time. And in that time, she's forced to live with the unraveling, not just of her story, but of her entire sense of self. The cell isn't the punishment. The punishment is watching her reflection shift each day from Sophie, the shining invention, back into Elena, the forgotten ghost of a girl who once ran from a crime scene and never looked back. Now she wakes up to the sound of metal doors clanging shut. She eats from a tray labeled with a number. She exists without applause, without audience, without reinvention. No one screams at her. No one shames her in the way she once shamed others. The world has simply moved on. She was the headline, and now she's a cautionary tale. I never showed up at her hearing. I didn't need to. My presence would have been redundant, because every time her name is called out during roll, every time a guard doesn't flinch at her sob story, every time a journalist mentions her in the same breath as fraud or fugitive, she remembers. She built her life like a glass house, and it took just one stone, one name, to bring it crashing down. I didn't have to scream the truth, I just had to let it breathe. And in doing so, I left her exactly where she put me once, behind walls, waiting for the world to remember who she really is. Her story ended behind bars, but mine kept going. If you've made it this far, you deserve to see what legacy looks like. Not the kind made of money, but the kind built on truth. She sent a letter from the detention center. I knew she would. I could almost picture her pacing in her cell, rehearsing the words, deciding how much regret to sprinkle in, how much denial to dress up as apology. It came in a plain envelope, no return address, just my name written in a hand I hadn't seen in months. No longer the sweeping confidence of Sophie Martin's curated image, but shaky, restrained, almost unrecognizable. I opened it once. I read it once. Then I folded it gently and slipped it into the back of the kitchen drawer, where I keep the things that remind me why I fought in the first place. Not for revenge, not even for justice, but for truth. Because surviving wasn't enough. Survival was just the beginning. It was the truth that rebuilt me. I never wrote her back. Instead, I poured my time into something Aunt Marjorie would have been proud of. The Marjorie Fund, which had started as a simple gesture of defiance, grew into something real, something rooted. We now help 3 women a month. Women who were wrongfully accused, who had been silenced, who had their dignity ripped from them by systems that listened to power before listening to pain. Some of them write to me, some of them send photos, some just send receipts from their first paycheck after clearing their names. Every story is a small light in the dark, not loud, not flashy, but steady. Aunt Marjorie once told me during a thunderstorm, as we sat under a patchy quilt sipping tea, justice arrives late, but when it does, it stays. I never understood it then. I do now. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sits quietly beside you on the porch, the scent of rosemary thick in the air, your fingers wrapped around a warm cup, and nothing left to defend. There's peace in that, a kind of peace I never thought I'd feel again. I still have that one letter from her. I kept it not to hold on, but to remind myself that forgiveness doesn't require proximity. That letting go isn't the same as letting someone back in. That silence can be an answer too. And that peace, real peace, comes when you stop needing someone else to feel sorry for what they did. You just live, fully, proudly, on your own terms. Every evening, I sit on Aunt Marjorie's old wooden chair, sip jasmine tea, and listen to the garden. Sometimes the wind rustles through the rosemary like it's whispering secrets. Sometimes the neighbor's cat slips under the fence like she owns the place. And sometimes, not often, but just enough, I close my eyes and feel everything settle. Not because the world is perfect, but because I reclaimed my place in it. I've written a new will. Simple, clear. Everything I have will go to the fund, to truth seekers, to women who were told to shut up, sit down, and accept what the world handed them. They'll never have to. Not on my watch. And when people ask me, and they still do, if I ever truly forgave her, I tell them this. Forgiveness doesn't mean inheritance. It means peace. And peace, finally, is mine. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, leave a comment below, share your thoughts, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Because there are more stories like this, and I'd love to share them with you.